The morning my stepfather showed up at the emergency room, I was still in a gown that didn't close in the back, hooked to an IV, and trying to remember if I'd called my mom back the night before. I hadn't. That part came back to me right away. The part where I'd seen his name on her phone screen and decided I didn't want to deal with it. I was 28. I'd just had my appendix out. The surgeon said it was close, another few hours and it would have ruptured. I was supposed to be resting. I was supposed to be, for once, the person being taken care of. He walked in without knocking. That was the first thing. The door had a little window, and I watched him through it for a second before he pushed it open, and there was something about the way he moved, not fast, not slow, just like he already owned the space, that made my stomach drop before he even said a word. "Your mother's in the car," he said. She didn't want to come up. I remember thinking that was strange. My mom had been in the delivery room when my cousin had her baby. She showed up for everything. She'd driven 4 hours once when I had a bad flu just to make sure I was eating soup. "Is she okay?" I asked. He pulled the chair from the corner of the room, the one meant for visitors, and sat down without being invited. He had this way of doing that, rearranging whatever room he was in so it fit him better. I'd noticed it at Thanksgiving. I'd noticed it the first time my mom brought him to Sunday dinner, 8 months after my dad passed. "She's fine," he said. "Worried about you. We both are." He didn't look worried. He looked like a man who had somewhere else to be. My dad died of a heart attack on a Tuesday in October, 2 years before all of this. He was 54. He was the kind of man who remembered everyone's coffee order and kept hard candy in his jacket pocket and cried at the end of every Pixar movie. When he died, something in our house went quiet that I don't think ever fully came back. My mom, her name is Patricia, but everyone calls her Pat. She didn't date. Not for a long time. She cleaned out my dad's closet and donated his clothes and kept his reading glasses on the nightstand, and I thought that was how it was going to be. I thought she had decided. Then she met him at a church fundraiser. His name was Gerald. He was 60, recently divorced, owned a landscaping company. He had a firm handshake and a habit of talking over people in a way that probably read as confidence if you weren't paying attention. I was paying attention from the start. But my mom was happy, really happy, the laughing at dinner kind of happy that I hadn't seen since my dad was alive. So I tried. I reminded myself that she was a grown woman. I brought wine to their dinners and asked him questions about his business and bit my tongue when he interrupted her mid-sentence for the 4th time in one evening. She married him 14 months after they met. Small ceremony. I was her maid of honor. I stood next to her and smiled for every photograph. And then things started to shift, slowly the way the temperature drops in late September. You don't notice until you're already cold. The first thing I noticed was the money. Not in a dramatic way, just small comments. He mentioned once, very casually, that my mom's savings account had a low interest rate, and he knew a guy who could help her move things around. She nodded like this was helpful. I filed it away. Then she stopped mentioning her book club. When I asked about it, she said she'd decided to take a break. "Gerald thinks I overcommit," she told me, and she laughed a little like it was a quirk. I didn't laugh. Her friend Rosalie, who she'd known since they were both in their 20s, stopped coming around. When I asked my mom about it, she got quiet and said Rosalie had said something rude about Gerald at a birthday dinner, and it had caused a whole thing, and she'd rather not get into it. I called Rosalie myself. Rosalie told me she'd asked my mom once if she was happy. That was all. She'd asked if she was happy, and Gerald had overheard, and that was the end of 25 years of friendship. I started calling my mom every other day instead of once a week. Sometimes she sounded like herself. Sometimes she sounded like she was choosing every word carefully, the way you do when someone's in the next room. Then came the supplements. Gerald had started bringing home these big amber bottles. Vitamins, he called them, a special blend his doctor had recommended for joint health and sleep. He was very particular about her taking them at the same time every day. He'd remind her at dinner. He'd text her in the afternoon to check. When I visited one weekend and she forgot to take them after lunch, he got this look on his face. Not angry exactly, but tight. And he said, "Pat, we talked about this." And she apologized immediately. The kind of apology that's already practiced. That night I looked up the brand on her bottles. It didn't have a website. It didn't have reviews. It had one listing on a resale site and a lot of forum posts from people asking if anyone had heard of it. I didn't sleep. I didn't say anything to my mom yet. I needed to think. I needed to be sure I wasn't being paranoid because Gerald had been telling her for months that I was overprotective, that I had trouble letting her have her own life, that my dad's death had made me clingy in an unhealthy way. He said it nicely, always with this concerned expression, like he was doing my mom a favor by diagnosing me, and I could see her absorbing it, see her starting to look at me sideways when I called too often or asked too many questions. That's the part that was hardest to explain to people later. By the time you realize what's happening, they've already rewritten the narrative about you. 2 weeks after I found the supplement listing, I had my appendix out. I was alone when they prepped me. My mom had called that morning, panicked, and said she was on her way, and I'd said okay. And then 2 hours passed and she didn't come, and when I texted her she said Gerald thought it would be better to wait and make sure it was actually serious before they drove all the way out. It was a 4-hour drive. My appendix was actually serious. I went into surgery without anyone there. I woke up in recovery and a nurse with a gray braid and reading glasses on a beaded chain held my hand for a minute and told me everything had gone well. I cried a little. I didn't even know why at the time. By the next morning, I'd been moved to a regular room. I was tired and sore, and there was a window with a view of the parking garage, and I kept watching cars pull in and out and waiting. Gerald walked in around 11. He sat in the chair. He told me my mom was in the car. And then after about 30 seconds of silence in which he looked around the room like he was assessing it, he said, "We need to talk about the house." I didn't understand at first. "What house?" "Your mother's house. The property value's gone up and we've been thinking about refinancing. We need both signatures if she wants to access the equity." He paused. "Yours too, since your father left you on the deed." My dad had put me on the deed when I turned 21. He sat me down at the kitchen table and explained it like he was giving me something precious. "This is your home too," he'd said. Always. I was still on oxygen. My IV line pulled a little every time I moved my arm. "I need to talk to my mom about this," I said. She asked me to handle it. He reached into his jacket and took out a folded set of papers. "It's straightforward. Just a signature." Something went still in me. Not calm, still. The specific stillness of understanding something you don't want to understand. "I'm not signing anything right now," I said. He looked at me the way you look at something mildly inconvenient. Then he leaned forward. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "Your mother needs this. You want to help your mother, don't you? I want to talk to her directly. She doesn't want to come up. She's tired. She's been worried about you. She doesn't need the stress. Gerald." I said his name slowly. "I'm not signing anything in a hospital bed without talking to my mom first." He stood up. He smoothed the front of his jacket. And then he said, very quietly, "You've always had a problem with me. From the very beginning. Your mother sees it. Everyone sees it. Please leave," I said. He didn't move for a moment. Then he stepped closer to the bed, close enough that I could smell his cologne, and he said, "I'm trying to take care of this family. You keep getting in the way." His voice was low, controlled. "Stop being selfish." I pressed the call button for the nurse. He reached out and put his hand over mine, not gently, and said, "Don't do that." I pressed it again. I said, "Don't." He grabbed my wrist. I pulled back and the IV line snagged, and I said, loudly, clearly, "Let go of me." He did, but then he raised his hand. I don't remember the actual impact. I remember the sound. I remember the ceiling, which is a strange thing to notice, but when you fall sideways from a hospital bed, the ceiling is what you see. I remember the cold floor through the thin gown. I remember my head ringing, and then I remember the door opening. A nurse, not the one with the braid, a younger one, stopped in the doorway and said, "Oh my God." And then she was calling out into the hallway, and there was noise, and Gerald was saying something in a very reasonable voice about how I'd been confused, how I'd been agitated, how it wasn't what it looked like. A hospital security guard was there within 2 minutes. A police officer arrived 11 minutes later. I know the timing because I counted. It was something to do while I was sitting on the floor waiting for someone to help me up. Gerald was escorted from the building. He was calm the whole time. That stuck with me. How calm he was. Like he'd done the calculation and decided calm was still the move. The officer, a woman, young, she had a name tag that said Vargas, crouched down next to me while they helped me back into the bed, and she said, "Can you tell me what happened?" I told her everything. Not just the hospital room, all of it. The supplements, Rosalie, the house, the papers he'd brought. She wrote it all down. She didn't interrupt me once. While I was talking, my mom walked in. She'd come up after all. Someone must have called down to the car, or maybe she'd seen Gerald being escorted through the lobby. I never found out which. She stood in the doorway in her good coat, the beige one she wore to church, and she looked at the officer, and she looked at me, and her face did something complicated that I don't have the right words for. "He hit you," she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. She sat down on the edge of the bed and took my hand, the one without the IV, and she didn't say anything for a long time. Gerald was charged with simple assault. I pushed for more, and Officer Vargas told me what we could pursue given what was documented. It wasn't as much as I wanted. I won't pretend it was, but the charge was real and it was on record, and that mattered. My mom had a friend from church, not Rosalie, someone else, a woman named Francis who I'd always liked, who had a nephew who was a family attorney. We called him the next day. I told her what I'd found about the supplements, and she called her own doctor and she stopped taking them immediately. She said she hadn't felt right in months. She said she thought it was grief. She said I thought something was wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with her. That took some time to say out loud. The refinancing papers were fraudulent. Gerald had forged her initials on preliminary documents he'd already sent to the lender, trying to establish a paper trail before getting my signature. The lender flagged it when our attorney contacted them. The fraud investigation opened 4 weeks after the hospital. I won't tell you it was clean and fast. It wasn't. There were months of calls and paperwork and a protection order that Gerald violated once in the parking lot of a grocery store where my mom was shopping. And he violated it so flagrantly in front of a security camera that the judge at his subsequent hearing didn't have much patience left for his reasonable voice. He lost the landscaping company during the civil proceedings. I don't know where he is now. My mom doesn't either, and she's made her peace with that. What I know is this. My mom sold the house on her terms, not his, and bought a small condo 20 minutes from me. She went back to her book club. She called Rosalie. Rosalie came over with a bottle of wine, and they stayed up until 2 in the morning, and my mom called me the next day and laughed on the phone in that way I'd missed. The real laugh, the one that sounds like it surprises her. Her bedroom has her own things in it now. My dad's reading glasses are back on the nightstand. I visit most Sundays. We sit at her kitchen table and drink coffee, and sometimes we don't even talk that much. We just exist in the same space, and it doesn't feel hollow the way it did right after my dad died. It feels like something that survived, something that we kept. She told me once, a few months after everything, that she'd seen what was happening. Somewhere underneath it, she'd known. But he made me feel like I was the one who was confused, she said. Like the problem was my perception. I told her that was exactly what he wanted, that it's not a personality flaw, what happened to her. It's a method. There are people who study it. There are names for what he did. She nodded slowly. She said, I kept thinking, your father would have known right away. I thought about that for a while. Then I said, you know now. She looked at me. She squeezed my hand the way she used to do when I was small and scared of something. Yeah, she said, I know now. That was enough. That was actually enough. If you've ever watched someone you love get smaller, a little more uncertain, a little more careful with their words, and you couldn't figure out why, or you could figure out why, but you didn't know what to do about it, I just want you to know you're not being paranoid. Trust the thing you noticed. Write it down. Tell someone. Take the photo of the document and email it to yourself and delete it before he gets home. Call the friend you haven't called in 6 months. There are people who will help you. I promise there are. My mom sleeps through the night now. She did that before. I'd forgotten she used to do that. I thought a lot about what made Gerald so effective for as long as he was. It wasn't charm exactly, though he had some version of it. It was patience. He was willing to work slowly. He understood that if you move fast, people notice. But if you move at the pace of ordinary life, one comment here, one suggestion there, one friendship, quietly discouraged. People just think things are changing. They don't think they're being changed. My mom is one of the sharpest people I know. She raised me on her own for stretches when my dad was traveling for work. She managed the household budget and helped her sister through a divorce and remembered every birthday without writing them down. She was not naive. She was not weak. She was grieving, and she was lonely, and she wanted to believe that something good had come into her life after something devastating. That's not a flaw. That's just being human. What Gerald did, the isolation, the supplements, the paperwork, none of it worked because my mom was foolish. It worked because he was deliberate and because he understood exactly which emotions to exploit and when. There's a difference. I think it matters to say that out loud. The thing I keep coming back to is the moment Officer Vargas crouched down next to me on that hospital floor and just let me talk. She didn't rush me. She didn't try to summarize what I was saying back to me or tell me what she thought happened before I finished. She just listened and wrote things down. And in that moment, after months of watching my mom's perception of reality get quietly rewritten, someone just believed me without qualification. I can't explain what that felt like, except to say I hadn't realized how much I needed it until it happened. That's the thing about being in it. You start to doubt your own read on things. You start to wonder if you're the problem. And some part of you, the part that loves the person being hurt, wants desperately to be wrong, wants to believe you're overreacting. Because if you're overreacting, then she's fine. And if she's fine, you don't have to do the hard thing. I had to do the hard thing anyway. And it cost something. It cost months of difficult conversations and paperwork and a mother who, for a little while, looked at me like I was the one making her life harder. That part was its own kind of painful. But here's what I believe now. And I believed it before any of this happened. And everything that happened only made me believe it more. The people who do what Gerald did, who identify someone's grief and use it as a door, they are counting on silence. They are counting on the people who notice to talk themselves out of saying something. They are counting on love to make us careful when we should be loud. Being loud is hard. Saying, I think something is wrong to someone who isn't ready to hear it is hard. Pressing a call button in a hospital room when a man is standing over you is hard. Hard doesn't mean wrong. Hard usually means necessary. My mom called Rosalie. Rosalie came over with wine and they stayed up until 2 a.m. That happened because someone asked a question in a restaurant 2 years earlier and refused to take the silence as a final answer. Actions reach further forward than we think they do when we're taking them. The reading glasses are back on the nightstand. That's the detail I keep coming back to. My mom put them back herself without anyone suggesting it. She just decided she wanted them there. Some things, once you get through the part that nearly broke them, come back stronger than they were. Not repaired, not the same. Just still there, still real, and that turns out to be enough.